kind of a little story that goes behind this. We have today with us James Madison, and he's going to go into a little story about how we, the people, wound up with the power to be able to do this. Mr. Madison?
Thank you. Well, good day, ladies and gentlemen. I trust that is still a proper and acceptable means of salutation. If not, I'm at the wrong convention. I recently discovered that there were certain school boards, and indeed schools. I've never used one in my life, good sir. I don't think anybody has any problem hearing me, do they? These school boards and schools seem to want to refer to their students in a means and in such a way that sounds more like science experiments than human beings. I found it to be most distasteful. However, let us attend to the matter at hand. Mr. Seymour, will, kind sir, is this somewhere where I can find it? Indeed. During the summer of 1787, it was very hot in Philadelphia, and 55 men got together at the State House, what you know to be Independence Hall. And we gathered to form a new government through a new constitution. But that's not why we were there, actually. For initially, only amendments to the Articles of Confederation were to be accomplished. However, I arrived on March 5th, and I had drawn up what is known as the Virginia Plan. For I knew in the 2 years and 400 books that I had consumed that the Articles of Confederation, which everybody knew was a complete disaster, could not be amended and thereby make it effective. We needed a new constitution. In the process, we developed 7 articles, and we had several amendments that would come later. But the 7 articles that were developed gave us a new government. During the convention, there was great rancor. Indeed, I would say that every example of discord was seen and heard. But we survived. And thus came a constitution that has existed and lasted for 236 years and still counting. It has been the model for over 100 nations who formed their own constitutions. But now, we are a nation in deep distress. In fact, I dare say that this nation is at greater risk than any other previous time since the Great Depression and the Civil War. The question is, how do we resolve these issues? For you see, the problem lies with the governing institutions that have strayed from their mandate and exceeded their authority. The solution, indeed the very salvation itself of this republic, lies in we the people. the very Constitution that is the law of the land of this great republic. Within that Constitution is something called Article 5, as you have just heard about. The question is, how did that come about and why? Article 5, as it was originally written, was simply to amend, and that's what it is called, it is the amendment article, and it was designed to allow Congress to come up with means whereby we could remain relevant as progress and time passed. The gentleman mostly responsible for Article 5, as you see it today, is a gentleman by the name of Colonel George Mason. Now, Mr. Mason was highly skeptical of the federal government and what could happen. Therefore, he approached me and said, we need another path through the states to amendments. Indeed. And thus I drafted the second approach, which allowed for the states to come up with their resolutions, their amendments, and submit them to Congress. Thought the matter was solved. It seemed that there were no objections and that he did not, Colonel Mason that is, did not have any further demands. Until Saturday, September 15th, 2 days before we were to sign. We were doing one last review of the 7 articles to make sure there were no refinements that needed to be made, and if they did, that's what we would do at that time. Right before General Washington gavelled the meeting to order, Colonel Mason came up to me and he said, Mr. Madison, I find it necessary that we must readdress the issue and the matter of Article 5. I said, but sir, we have already given you the path, the second path that you requested through the states. He said, indeed, sir, you have. But you have left Congress in charge of both paths. Are we to expect Congress to govern itself, to oversee itself? What if Congress is the problem? Nay, sir, I think not. Congress must be reined in by the states. I immediately reread the 5th article, and though I did not concur with Colonel Mason's assessment, I did believe that there would be people that would adopt his interpretation. I suggested to Colonel Mason, sir, I recommend that you request from General Washington the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole. And thus it was done. And when we got to Article 5, Colonel Mason rose and he addressed the Committee of the Whole, laying out the argument which was most effective in that there had to be a second path to amendments because we could not rely upon the federal government to govern itself. His argument was indeed persuasive. The vote was unanimous. And we had Mr. Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania and Mr. Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts make suggestions and recommendations during the course of discussion. and thus the matter was referred to the Committee of Style, where Mr. Morris and Mr. Gary fashioned Article 5, leaving the matter to the states in a second path by virtue of a convention of states. Congress was extracted from the matter entirely, whereupon 2/3 of the states, in concurrent resolution and application, could deliver to Congress the request for a convention of states. Congress must call for the convention of states. This is not a maybe or a we'll think about it type of matter. No, indeed. Congress must call for the convention of states. And should the convention of states come up with the amendments, they would not just be proposed to Congress. It would be Congress's responsibility to take those amendments and refer them back to the states for ratification. Congress is merely the messenger boy. Now, they do have one power, and that is to determine whether or not the the ratification would be by convention or by state legislature. That is their only power. The power has been given to the people by Article 5. It is that means which will allow the states and the people to rectify a federal government that is no longer responsive to the people. We formed this government to have 3 branches of government: the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive. But indeed, we no longer have 3 branches of government. We have 4. And the 4th one is called the bureaucracy. It is larger than the other 3 combined. It is not elected, and even to the extent that it is appointed, very few are literally confirmed by the Senate. For this matter to be resolved, we must have a convention of states. It is imperative. It is imperative that the beast be put back into its cage, and that we, the people, let liberty ring once again. God speak to you all. Mr. Seymour.